today we're gonna start with Berkshire Hathaway. Usually I have a slogan, guys, but shockingly, they didn't have one. So let's look at their company profile. Their mission statement is to deliver the right part exactly on time and exceed our internal and external customer requirements through continuous improvement and provide a place for hardworking, dedicated, knowledgeable, and ethical people who believe in the company. When I got this, guys, now that I think about it, I think this is the mission statement for Berkshire Hathaway, the real estate, because they kind of describe themselves as two different companies because their vision statement is to be the provider of choice in our communities for comprehensive real estate and financial solution. You know what I mean? So I might have gotten the wrong mission statement and the vision statement. So what I actually got was a letter from the CEO, or, the one and only, the infamous Warren Buffett. But honestly, I wasn't really sure of who exactly this guy was. So, but he kind of goes, "Dear reader, you probably know that I don't make stock recommendations." He's kind of known as like the stock god. However, I have two thoughts regarding your personal expenditures that can save you real money. So he doesn't give stock advice, but he knows what to buy. And what's interesting about him is that if you Google his name, there's going to be multiple articles that go what he just bought and what he just sold. So he was an interesting character. Anyways, personally for me, when I got this company to be reviewed, what I thought this company was, I actually didn't know what this company did. I just had, that wait, what face? Like, what is this? And so when I did the research, I actually spent time reading about the real estate part, and then I didn't realize that this wasn't the business, and that like I should have read something else. And then you just get into a mode where you just don't know what you're reading. And I just actually got really mad, and I was like, I'm not gonna read this. So I didn't read it for a day. So let's get started. We did mention Buffett Oppa, so you guys are probably thinking, okay, let's get started with the history. He looks pretty old. He probably built this company. He probably founded it. So what is this company? Come on, Buffett Oppa. Like, give me the history of Buffett Oppa, right? Actually, he didn't start it, shockingly. This person, Oliver Chase, who was a businessman very, very long time ago, founder of New England Textile Manufacturing Company. We were just talking about like Buffett Oppa owning all these like businesses and then somehow going back to textile. Yeah, guys, this was a textile company. So he worked as a carpenter for Samuel Slater, who was a successful textile mills owner. So let's get to the history. 1806. So in 1806, Oliver, he looked into creating a new textile company because at the time he was like the one to go for. He was the textile god. He got lessons from the really infamous textile person, so everyone's like, hey, like, help me. So by 1813, he was helping out with organizing several new mills, and he was more famous. He's getting famous, like when you hear about Oliver, everyone was like, hey, it's the textile guy, that type of famous. And by 1818, they officially opened the first textile manufacturing company. And by 1839, they acquired a lot of companies, starting with the Valley Falls Company, which is actually where this is located. And they did a lot of reorganization. They also acquired other factories in like Connecticut, Rhode Island. Their names were very hard. One was like Manville Mill in Rhode Island. The other one was like Muta's Cotton Factory. So not only did they own textile, but also own something related to that area. Valley Falls Company is in Rhode Island. One thing that I didn't add on was that in 1852, Oliver did pass away, so his son got to take over the company. And in 1929, what happened to the company, and what does this have to do with Berkshire Hathaway? Valley Fall Company and other companies that we just listed decided to combine into one big giant manufacturing company named Berkshire. I'm not sure where they got the name, but they got into a big company and they opened it in Massachusetts. So companies that we just mentioned and other companies called Coventry Company, Greylock Mills, some Fort Dummer Mills, they're all combined. So anything that relates to textile or all of those like industry, they decided to combine into one thing. And they got the name Berkshire Fine Spinning Associate. So they became a textile giant since 1% of all electricity was generated by Berkshire, which might not seem a lot, but it is a lot. And also, they were accounted for about 25% of the fine cotton textile production in US. And by 1948, Berkshire earned $29.5 million with 11,000 workers. So, bunch of companies, we're all going to the moon. Let's go to the moon. Let's go, Kaza. Is this like the company you want to be when you graduate because you want to work in a textile company? No, because a year later, Great Depression came, which had a huge impact to the company. And also what's shocking was that competitors from the South was doing much better due to the environment that they were in. And so the environments included like the wages in the southern region was much cheaper than where they were located. Also that the market factors were actually favoring more towards the southern products. And so, yeah, they weren't doing that well. They did recover a bit from World War II and the Korean War, but not doing so well as they thought they were going to do after the merge. Now, obviously, they had their up and down. They were trying their best to survive. But unfortunately, by 1955, they had to merge with Hathaway Manufacturing Company in Massachusetts. So now we got the name, Berkshire Hathaway. Wow, right? So the company Hathaway Manufacturing was founded in New Bedford in 1888 by a person named Horatio Hathaway. And they were actually not doing a good job either due to the World War I. And so they decided to combine together. You know, like if you're not doing good and they're not doing good, maybe if we combine, we'll get better. So the name became Berkshire Hathaway. Both of them combined had a total of 15 plants, 12,000 workers, making 120 million revenues. Wow. Now are they doing a good job? Unfortunately not. So they actually had to close a lot of operations in like Massachusetts, and actually had to sold a couple of the plants in Rhode Island. So then you're kind of wondering now, being like, hey, where's Buffett over? Like, I'm waiting for my Buffett, you know, like he's supposed to come somewhat now. Well, let's talk a little bit about Warren Buffett. He was born in Omaha, Nebraska, graduated from U of Nebraska at age of 19, also graduated from Columbia Business School. He worked as a New York Institute of Finance, where he wanted to focus his economics background and start his partnership for various business. And by partnership, he means investment. So in 1956, he created Buffett Partnership. And for me, I didn't understand what that meant, but it was basically this. People ask him for managing their money. And he did such a good job that a lot of people would come to him and ask. So his reputation really grew. And their partnership style was that the limited partners got 6% yearly on investments and gained 75% profit above, while vice versa, Buffett would get the 25%. And so, you know, obviously he's doing a lot of investment jobs. He's done couples so far. A lot of people have been recognizing him as like, oh, he's a good investor. He knows what to buy. He knows like what's good and what's maybe not good. So in 1962, Buffett actually thought that Berkshire Hathaway was a good company. It caught his attention at one point. So right before Buffett Oppa comes in, the mill had to decline to 7 plants, guys. We started with 15 and now it's 7. And from 12K people to 6K people. So everything's cutting in half, right? You kind of know that they're not doing a good job. Every time everything's being cutted, it's been awful. And what's kind of interesting was that Buffett at the time was interested in the company because he noticed that there were some patterns from the direction of the stock as the company closes a mill. So I'm guessing it might have been going up a little every time it closed it. So he was maybe like thinking about, oh, maybe we should sell it when they're about to close. So Buffett ended up buying Berkshire stock at $7.6 a share. And later on, he did acknowledge that the textile business was starting to die out. So the financial situation wasn't going to improve. So he was, I guess, kind of looking for a good time to exit after he purchased it. And so by 1964, Berkshire wanted to buy back Buffett's shares at $11.50. And Buffett was like, yeah, I kind of see that, you guys don't have a future. I don't know this textile business you're running. Like we said, South is kind of doing better than you guys. I don't know if my money's worth it. So he's like, yeah, okay. And then, so he got the paper, it's not like online things, right? And he later looked at the paper and he's like, hey, wait. Instead of saying $11.50, it said $11.38. And so he's like, the fuck? So instead of just kind of being like, let it go. Hey, okay, fine. I'll just waste my $12 or 12 cents of how much stock I purchased. He decided to buy more stock and fire the guy who did this, Stanton. What happened in 1965? He purchased enough stock to fire him and became the majority owner of the failing textile business. And the first thing he did, the very first thing, was that he declined to 2 mills of the 7 mills right away. He says, like, 5 of them, get out of here. And of the 6K people, he dropped down to 2.3K employees. And then he's like, okay, let's look for other potentials. Let's not be stuck in textile and look for other things, right? And also, because he was like born and raised in Nebraska, he actually moved the whole business to Omaha, Nebraska from New Bedford. So the first thing he did was actually for 2 years after the purchase, it was very profitable. But by 1967, it just fell sharply because, like, he noticed that textile business wasn't a successful one. So he decided to expand to other industries. And the first thing that he started was what you guys said, insurance industry. So the first thing that he bought was National Indemnity Company and National Fire and Marine Insurance Company. They're both purchased by Buffett and they're both located in Nebraska. So you may be thinking, okay, he was looking for other potential, but why insurance? So doing some research, I've noticed that using the insurance claims, which is basically where they owe money, but you don't have to pay it back until like the claims were settled. That's a lot of money, right? It's a good way to get a bunch of money from insurance that, like people aren't going to use right away and invest in other companies or other industries to make more money. You may be wondering, like, why Nebraska? Why insurance? What's his standard, right? None. If he likes it, he just purchases it. If he thinks there's potential, if he likes the people, if he likes the company, if he likes the material, he just purchases it. Yeah, and what's interesting was he's really good at it, though. He's really good at picking it. From 1967 on to this time, bunch of purchasing of companies. So what I ended up doing was just picking out some of my favorable ones or some of the things that was kind of interesting. So if you're missing out of a company that you know of and you're just kind of like, hey, she's not mentioning this, dude, like too many. So let's continue on with 1985. A big memorable moment was that the last textile operations was shut down. Adios textile business. He was actually very great with it. He at the time noticed that textile business compared to insurance or other type of businesses that he owned wasn't doing as much. What's kind of unfortunate was that he was actually regretting purchasing this company. Makes sense because his emotions came out first where he got scammed, but he still did a very good job of taking care of the workers, working with the textile companies, or at least what I read, and then just kind of being like, hey, we tried our best. And he thanked everyone who worked really hard in the textile business. So It was like a good ending, like good goodbye, thank you for working hard type of deal. And they officially became the multinational conglomerate holding company, which I've never heard of that word, but apparently they ended up becoming a multinational company owning company. What an interesting way of earning money, guys. Now, in 1986, right after their textile business ended, they decided to get Scott Fetzer, which is another company. I actually thought this was a name, right? But this company is the owner of the World Book Encyclopedia and manufacturer and marketer of products for the home, family, and industry with 33 brands that they own. Or maybe not they own, but they sell. And I guess another home appliance that was famous was the vacuum cleaner. Now, they sold it for $60 a share, total of $400 million. And what attracted the business to Buffett was that the steady cash flow. So that was why they purchased it. Now, in 1988, they decided to get listed on New York Stock Exchange. And the reason why was very simple. Actually, right before they were listed in New York Stock Exchange, they were doing actually a very good job of getting profit from other companies that they actually purchased. So what's also interesting was that as the stock market continued to be uprise in the decade, Buffett's policy of buying undervalued stock and holding them for a long time was the trend, for him at least. That's what he wanted to do. And shockingly, his stock profile, like around this time, was doing a very good job compared to Dow Jones. At one point, his stock profile grew 748%, which almost tripled Dow Jones' average of 233.6%. And even when stock crashes, it apparently doesn't matter for Buffett. How? Because what's shocking was that he was up by 2.8 while others were down by 2.5. Like, there were times when this happened for Buffett. And that's when people started to be like, is he God? Is he stock God, finance God? Does he know all this apparently? And so the reason why they listed on NYSE was that you were able to purchase the stock previously in the over-the-counter market, but he did list it because he wanted to reduce transaction costs for shareholders. So I guess it was kind of like a nice move. But now, the same year, what's interesting was that everyone knows, ta-da! Who's a Coca-Cola fan, guys? Warren Buffett invests in Coca-Cola. So a little bit about the news. They first bought 1 billion Coca-Cola stock in 1988, just after the Black Monday 1987 market crash. So what made him invest in it? Because it was the biggest market share in the beverage industry at the time, and it still does today. They recognize, like the potentials and everything, the competition that they had, obviously with Pepsi, better. So yeah, they were holding around they had 10%, which ends up being the second largest shareholder for Buffett. Now in 1994, I just brought fun mistakes that Buffett made, because if someone's just too perfect, then you just kind of feel overwhelmed. So you kind of need something that he didn't do well. So the first thing was that he made a common mistake for the capital cities. He could have sold his 10 million shares of capital cities for $85, but instead sold it for $64, which was a big money, which is, like a simple common mistakes, guys. It's not like a big mistake. But for him, it was just kind of like, oh, I should have seen that coming. And he actually said that he was a bit pessimistic about capital cities, thinking that it won't go that well. And then the second mistake was the US Air, where he bought it for $358 million, but noticed it was a turnaround movement. So, and it wasn't really what Buffett was thinking of, because he actually quoted saying that US Air has a cost structure which is non-viable in today's airline business. I think the cost structure could be brought into line, but whether it was brought into line or not is another question. Looking back, the answer is not to get into businesses that need to solve problems like that. So it was basically a mistake I made. And the result ended up being that it was a $268.5 million write-down for the stock. What does that mean? Basically, their value just goes bye-bye. It's not worth it. But you know what's shocking of all this big number? You'd be like, Did he get bankrupt? Is he poor? Guys, it had no effect on Buffett at all. It was just kind of like, yeah, okay. Oh, well. In 1996, your favorite character is coming. Everyone knows. I actually didn't know that Geico stood for Government Employee Insurance Company. That's why it's Geico. And that Geico had a competitive advantage by being the first major insurer to market directly to customers. What's interesting about Geico to Buffett and Berkshire Hathaway was that they slowly purchased stock over like a few decades. So actually in 1970, they first purchased a bit of Geico stock. And in 1996, now Berkshire Hathaway officially owns Geico. So they basically had this like long-term, one-sided love for 45 years to Geico. Geico was one of their biggest source of capital. The total float of all the Berkshire insurance at the time was 138 billion as end of 2020. I didn't expect Geico to make this much money, guys. All I remember was just the Geico ads or the commercials that they always talk about with that character just coming out and they're like, Geico, something, something. And you're like, oh, okay, it must be some type of like reptile company, right? But like reading this, you're just like, what the heck? The same year, guys, the infamous Class B stock. Let's start off with, they decided to create a Class B stock. And so they called Class A stock the company's original shares. So what Berkshire stock is worth. So Class B stock is actually valued at 1/30th of Class A share stock. First of all, the reason why they created a B stock was they wanted to discourage brokers from marketing unit trusts. Basically selling their stock cheaper than normal price. What Buffett actually said was that small investors couldn't even look at purchasing Class A stock, guys. So he wanted to make company stock available at a lower price without going through the expense, all the unit trust issues. And so the B stock had the value of like the voting of 1/200th. So it doesn't worth as much in terms of voting, but the fact that I could purchase a stock from Berkshire Hathaway was, I guess, more the reason why they created this Class B stock. And so you're kind of wondering, okay, 1/30th, how much could it be? Like probably a couple $100, right? In 1996, it was worth $1,000 a share. You could kind of imagine how much Class A stock was, but the reason why Class A stock was worth that much was they never split. Moving on. Lots of companies being purchased. Keep purchasing. Let's purchase more. 2002. I brought this one because it was kind of my favorite. Because this kind of ties into my Victoria's Secret. We talked about Fruit of Looms, which is manufacturer of clothing and underclothing. So like panties. And what was interesting was that they were filing bankruptcy in 1999. Since they were actually a 130-year-old company, guys. What Berkshire Hathaway did was they basically bought the company for $835 million, thinking that they have potentials to grow. They were like, we agreed to buy Fruit of Looms for two major reasons: the strength of the brand and the managerial talent of the CEO. It was nice that they not only are looking into companies that are new, fresh, like the startups, but also companies that have long histories but are having a little bit of trouble, so that they want to lend a hand. Now, moving on 8 more years. I know we're skipping through the 2008 crisis, but it was a lot. 2010, Burlington Northern Santa Fe Corporation. I brought this one because this company is the owner of BNSF Railway. So not only just insurance, underclothing, what do we have? Like encyclopedia, airline. He's just going everywhere, guys. Just everywhere. This company is the parent of the railway. And what's interesting about this company was that it was the biggest deal than other companies. So they purchased this company for $44 billion. Originally made $26 billion to offer because they wanted to buy the remaining 77.4% of the corporation, which ends up being like valued at $34. And then with other like debts and investments and blah, 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 brings a total of $44 billion. It's now like since I'm saying billion and million so many times, it just feels like $1 or $2. So the deal was that the company will merge with the R acquisition company and change the name instead of corporation to LLC. And that was a big purchase. Now in 2016, a lot of people might like this one and might know of this one, but they purchased Apple stock. Not Apple. They didn't purchase Apple yet. So he bought 9.8 million shares of Apple at this time, which was the second big tech investment from Buffett. The first one was actually IBM. He actually did purchase IBM. He at this time believed that it was cheap price compared to what the company is worth. Now, moving on. Just between 2016 and 2021, I'm going to say this again, he bought a bunch of more companies in between. Now, when I first Googled it, I saw $275.02. And I was like, what is this? This was actually the Class B stock. So they still do have the Class A and Class B. So then I was like, okay, I don't want to see Class B. I want to see Class A. And wow. What is this price? I've never seen this price. What is this price? It's so scary. It said 400,000? Right? I think that was the final price, a bit above. So yeah, would you buy a house or their stock? I think they actually mentioned don't buy their stock at one of the things, but this is their stock price. Some fun things to look out for is obviously, I didn't get to get my cursor out, but as you guys can see in the 2008-ish region, it's obviously the 2008 crisis. And then the biggest drop happened in 2020 because of COVID. And what's interesting was that he ended up selling to exit 4 big airline groups. So American Airline, United, Delta, and Southwest. And he was like, it's okay, I'll accept the loss. And what's also interesting was that in 2008 crisis, they actually did a great purchasing downturn, which are basically when the market just crashes, they purchase it right away, hoping that it's going to grow up. Somehow in 2020, they didn't do that. So, you know, the watchers were kind of like, what's going on? You know, what's going on? Why? However, second half of 2020, do you see that huge increase? And do you know why? So Buffett's like Apple stock. Oh, you guys don't see it. Oh, yeah, you do. It's above my head right here. This is 2020, but do you see that huge increase, guys? Apple made 4 times. So he was at 31 billion when he got it. It raised to $120 billion. Bank of America also doubled. And I found this super interesting. Coca-Cola and American Express also went crazy, guys. Crazy. He had $1.3 billion. I think it was dollars. Raising it to $22 billion. And American Express starting from $1.2 billion to $19 billion. Swear to God, he can tell the future. So, you could see. I brought this, it was kind of interesting. The top 5 equity holding. So you see that there's Apple, Bank of America, Coca-Cola, American Express, and he actually also owns Verizon. He has a lot in his hand. Another thing interesting that happened in 2021, he names his successor and that he is going to give him, you know, all the credit. He really likes you. You know, it's an amazing thing that you are here with us. You know, he praises both men, saying they're both wonderful guys. Also in 2021, he's like, is worth a record $139 billion. But what was interesting was that it did jump in a value, like I said, of 139 billion around September. Berkshire Hathaway would command a 158 billion stake if it hadn't sold any Apple shares. So in between, he actually did sell some. Oh, I just sell. So I think the market watchers kind of view Berkshire Hathaway is like a TV show. Like they get sad. It's like a football game. They get sad when he does like he sells things by his mistakes, and then they just go, "Oh my God, it's so smart!" When it just goes crazy to the moon, right? What was interesting with Berkshire Hathaway is that they actually have an annual meeting, and I brought this one because I really found this interesting. And it's very different from other people's quarterly report / annual meeting. What normal company does is they go through how much they made, what was sold, and you know, how well I'm doing. He actually goes, I'll just give you like a comment of like how much we made and stuff, but you know, that's not important. We'll talk about like the market, the financial situation that's going on, what I think about what's happening to the market. Is very unique. So I brought like top 5 that he's mentioned, but there were more. So if you guys are interested in seeing this, feel free. It's probably on YouTube somewhere. Let's get started. The first one, the investment and the operating results of year over year. So he has advised investors to focus on the company's operating earnings. He did do better. You know that the early 2020 of March, you saw that huge downfall and then it went crazy up. Thank you to Apple. And that Berkshire's operating division collectively recorded a 5.4% year-over-year increase in revenue. Now, the next topic was that he said, I do not think the average person can pick stocks. I don't know, I just find interesting about what he says and how he phrases. So he like reiterates his long-standing suggestions, you know, and that like people should actually invest in the S&P 500 index fund and not by trying to pick stocks. Kind of hurt my feelings because I was like, oh shoot, that's kind of me, you know. I do it by like, oh shoot, I like that clothing, I should buy their stocks. He presented the list of the top 20 largest companies in the world by market capitalization, both in 1989 and today's, and he kind of goes, hey, you see those in 1989, the top 20s? They're not the same in 2021. And also he goes, the largest such company today, like Apple, with like a market cap of over $2 trillion, is more than 20 times more value than the largest company in 1989. And he also advised, he's like, you could help, but do well if you have a diversified group of US equities. But guys, there's a but. He's like, you shouldn't make 30 to 40 trades a day because that's not a wise way to invest. But he's kind of like, you know, make it very diverse, but not too diverse. It's so hard. Then what's that limit, man? Tell me that limit. Is it like 15 is like the right diversity? Moving on. People get attached to industry. So elaborating on his advice to the new investors where they should choose diversified index fund rather than picking the stocks, he's like, you know, there's a lot more to picking stocks than figuring out what will be a wonderful industry. He's like, he used the auto industry as an example. He observed that there are more than 2,000 defunct companies in the US alone. In 2009, there were just 3 US automakers, which 2 were in bankruptcy at the time. That was his advice. I don't know if I should call this advice, but feedback. And then they kind of talked about the March 2020, basically when COVID hit, what happened? Was Berkshire too fearful in March 2020? A shareholder asked whether Berkshire was too fearful in March 2020, which I would have been fearful, guys. Because of all the lockdowns, the COVID-19, and stocks going crazy. He's like, yeah, airline were the most prominent beneficiaries of government help, but he noted that the aid came from Berkshire aid came after Berkshire sold these holdings, and saying we might not have gotten the same result if Berkshire still held them. And he also said that the Fed would act with the speed and decisiveness. The next thing that he said was, we've had a lot more people in casino. And I actually thought he would be talking about like cryptocurrency, but he was talking about the SPACs. So what is SPAC? Which stands for Special Purpose Acquisition Company. And so kind of looking it up, correct me if I'm wrong, no commercial operations, basically, and form strictly to raise capital through IPO for purpose of acquiring or merging with existing companies. They're called a blank check companies, where at the time of their IPO, they might actually not have an existing business operation. So they're kind of like, we have this like idea, we want to merge with companies, we need your help. So Buffett kind of called them an exaggerated version of gambling for investors to pay silly fees. Don't want to use that word, but the key point is that he kind of sees the negative impact from the SPACs that's happening. And that, is it really like a good idea to invest in them? Right? And finally, I brought this one, which I found interesting, was cryptocurrency skepticism. In response to a question about cryptocurrency, which obviously people would ask, especially if you are like the financial stock market god, his friend Munger said, I don't welcome a meme for paying kidnappers and distortionist. Buffett had bugged the question over because he didn't want to, you know, like talk about that area, right? But you kind of get a clue on what he thinks about cryptocurrency. To end the Berkshire Hathaway, or should I just call it Warren Buffett's company, I really advise you guys to watch this interview. I am not going to play it, but he sounds super smart and it seems like he can forecast the future, guys. I swear to God. But that was all for Warren Buffett and his company, Berkshire Hathaway. That's all I have for you guys today. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask. But other than that, I'm done. So guys, let's learn about